whenever I did Birmingham versus Villa games or Birmingham versus West Brom, I always ensured I had a pundit from Villa and a pundit from Birmingham, so I could never be accused of anything. We were the first to ever do that. From the 90 minutes, you will suffer everything. You know, you'll laugh, you'll cry, despair, anxiety. You'd have every known emotion to man during 90 minutes. So I'm going to enjoy that, and I'm going to let the listener join me on that little ride for 90 minutes. Ability without hard work's a waste of time. I quote an old ice hockey coach, Don Cherry, of the Boston Bruins. And in his book, he wrote, "Never underestimate the power of desire over ability."
Could do with every guest I have, Tom. I started the very origins of their early year career. How did it begin for you?
I was in business, to be fair. I came into the industry quite late. I was in business, and I was approached to do, funny enough, it's a weird story, but I got a call from, daft as it may seem, Jeff Greaves at Birmingham City, who said, do you want to do the PA at Blues, play some music and stuff? Yeah, of course, no problem. Well, I've been doing that a few weeks when my phone at home went, and it was Trevor Francis, right? A young Trevor Francis, rest his soul. He was only a young lad himself, and he wanted to meet up, but I didn't believe it was him. I thought it was my mate taking the mick. So I told him to do one, and then I got a call from Jeff Greaves saying it was Trevor Francis. It was, so I rang him back and apologised and went to see him. And because of that, I got into doing the Birmingham City thing, talking to players and playing their favourite hits and stuff. And from that, I got an opportunity to go to hospital radio. BHBN it was, based at the county ground. And I enjoyed doing that immensely. And it's where I met Paul Franks, who went on to work at BBC WM. I met Paul Franks there. And we were doing a couple of shows a week together, not sport, just music-based shows. And through that, and using contacts, I interviewed various people at the club. And through that, I got the opportunity to do a game for BBC Radio Birmingham, which is now WM. Tim Russell, the sports editor, said, "Would you like to do the Birmingham games for me?" And I said, yes. So I did the Birmingham games. Some I did reporting. Some I did as a pundit for him, going to places like West Ham where he was doing the commentary and I'd be the pundit. And I absolutely loved it. And then out of the blue, I got a call from the legend that is Tony Butler, rest his soul as well. And I remember it to this day. It was like, hello, my boy. That's how he spoke. And he said, Tony Butler, I'll see you at the D Club tomorrow, 1:00. Not, would you mind meeting me? It was I'll see you at the D Club. That was at Birmingham City. I said, yeah, okay. And I went down to meet him because he was a legend in broadcasting. For me to be in the same place as him was just frankly quite amazing. So I went down to see him, and he went, right, you're working for me? Stoke against Blues tomorrow, because this was a Friday lunchtime. I went, yeah, okay. And that was it. That was the interview. That was me at BR&B. And it was quite funny because I did the game, and it was 0-0. I'll never forget it. It was 0-0. And I thought I'd done a good job. And the following day, the following day after the game, I was playing for BR&B's football team, my first game for them at Tally-Ho. George Gavin had put my name in and I was playing for them. So I walked into the dressing room and Butler, who was the manager, has gone, if that's the best you can do, you can up back to the BBC. That was his... Absolutely deflated. I've gone, but I now know what he was doing. He was testing me. Was I strong enough to cope with everything that's thrown at me? And would I go home crying, or would I then said, I'll show you. That was my attitude, and I think he loved that. And that was the start of it, and that was it. That was me at BR&B, and I was there 36 years.
Well, you're a big Birmingham fan. I read that your parents were from Northern Ireland and Glasgow. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's right. My dad's Glaswegian, big Celtic fan he was, my dad.
Yeah.
My mum's from Belfast, and they met in abroad in the army. They were both in the army during the war, and they met abroad. And, my dad agreed to come down because my granny Sullivan, my mum's mum, had moved to Birmingham. And so he agreed to move to Birmingham. So he came down to Birmingham, and I was born just after he got here. But when he came here, he was Birmingham City because they had a player called Alex Govan playing for them, I think. He was Scottish connection anyway, he decided. And that was it. Birmingham City was always my team. He used to walk me to, me and him would walk from New John Street West, because we lived in the salubrious area of to the back of 437 New John Street West, between Summer Lane and Newtown Road. It was like an attic, a bedroom, and a downstairs, no porch, no anything else. And there was 10 of us. that was them days. It was no electricity, I might add, either, by the way. I'm not looking for sympathy, but there was no electricity. It was gas mantles. It was cold water only, the outside toilet. And that's the way we grew up. And so every Saturday, alternate Saturdays, he'd walk me to the match. We'd walk over Dartmouth Street, Lawley Street to the game, walk up so I can sit. Remember it, walking with my dad up St Andrew Street. We'd go in the Cop end, the Emmeline end it was called, but we'd be on the Cop. And he'd put me down the front by the wall, and he'd be at the back with his mates. That's how he did it, until I was old enough to clear off to the Chiltern. And that's when I went to the Chiltern. What else?
How important was that upbringing for you, Tom, in terms of obviously migration into Birmingham, very significant as a city as a whole, obviously influencing you in terms of being driven within the footballing industry? Was that significant for you to kind of have this outlook to be persistent and driven?
Yes. I think my grandma Sullivan, my granny Sullivan, came from Belfast with my granddad John Sullivan and my mum and my aunt Pauline. And they were faced with, no Irish, no blacks on every window when they were looking for places to live. They had to contend with that. It was extremely racist towards Irish people and people from other continents. Totally wrong. But, because of that, my granddad had lived through, and my grand lived through the Troubles in Northern Ireland. They'd been through all that. So nothing here was going to face them. So they stuck at it. They eventually lived up in Kitts Green, Lee Village, and it had like indoor toilet and hot water. I mean, it was amazing for me to go up there and see them. But that upbringing with my mum, and remember my mum and dad, as a kid, my mum was out of work, my dad was out of work, he couldn't get a job. He was at what they call a pot man at the local pub, the Brit, and my mum was a barmaid, and they scraped by. But there was so many of us. I lost 2 sisters, died, but there was 8 of us nonetheless to feed. How they did it, I have no idea how my mum and dad did it, but they did it. I went to school just off Summer Lane in Brearley Street called St Chad's, and there was only 2 blues fans there, me and my great pal Cornelius Walsh, who's family from Ireland as well. And it's crazy. We used to get beat up regularly because we were the only 2 blues fans in the school. And to make it worse, I had to walk past Summer Lane on the way home, and that school was like 100% Aston Villa. So, but listen, it was all part of the fabric of growing up in an inner city slum area where, I used to go to school. I wore black pumps, plimsolls they call them now, but black pumps, with my toe sticking out and my backside hanging out my trousers. But I never had a problem because all my mates were the same. There was no peer pressure because we were all the same. We're all broke. Our families were hard pressed. And that's how we grew up, living in those areas. It was tough. Was it character forming? I'd like to say it is. I've had to deal with adversity all my life. People saying you couldn't do this, you can't do that. And if you want me to do something, tell me I can't do it. That's the driving force for me. That makes me determined. So I had that upbringing in a very, very tough area, a very tough inner city area. And it was slums, there's no doubt about it. It was like, to explain, as I said, cold water, tin bath, no toilet, that was outside, shared toilet. You go in there, you opened your door, you're in the room. There's a meter in one side, a sink in the other, cellar steps to get the cold. There was a bedroom with your mum and dad, and then the attic the rest of us were in. The ice was on the inside of the windows in the winter, not outside, inside. I'm not looking for sympathy. I didn't know anything different. All my mates were the same, so it was fantastic.
Just on your experiences, and you mentioned your opportunity to play records with the Birmingham team. Was that seen as a bit of an escapism for you from the hardship of the upbringing you've just mentioned, and then all of a sudden you get your opportunity to work within football, and it's glamorized and everyone loves football, and you're with your friends and that, and you've seen players, etc. How was that for you?
I think it was because, remember, this was in the 70s now. I mean, we'd gone past, my dad had got a job at Fisher and Ludlow's, and all that sort of stuff, and then I'd moved out of home and everything. So I wasn't in that environment, but that was still at the background. But I was still a working class lad who worked for a living. But now, being a blues fan and going every week, and then all of a sudden, I'm exposed to footballers. And Trevor Francis has called me, for goodness sake, called me. I was like, wow, this is like, I mean, I must have rang everybody I knew and told them, because that's how it was for me. But I used to, because my mates were important to me, and to this day, they still are the same mates that I grew up with. I'd do the teams at 2:55, read out the teams, then I'd run round to the Tilton to stand with my mates, run back at half-time to do the half-time scores, and run back again to do the end of the game. That's how it was, because I always wanted to let my mates say, in the end, when I got BR&B, I couldn't do that. But nevertheless, that's how I did it. And all of a sudden, I'm in the Players' Lounge and I'm friends with Gary Pendry and Trevor Francis and Alan Campbell and Joe Gallagher. Wow. My whole life changed, But I'm lucky that, coming from the family I come with, if I ever got a bit too big for my boots, they slapped me down. No question, they slapped me down. So did my mates. My mates slapped me down as well. So I was never allowed to get carried away by it all. But did I enjoy it? Absolutely. To mix with, and even to this day, one of my very best friends is Gary Pendry. Trevor was, sadly no longer with us now. But all those guys are still my greatest of pals, even to this day. Even to this day.
You've been a football fan and kind of the emotional aspect of it, and then having to realise, well, you've got work to do and you need to network and you need to build relationships up with managers and players of Birmingham City and other West Midlands clubs. Any advice on there in terms of that? Because people that might be listening to this podcast might think about networking in other areas, within education, within business. Is there anything that you think's key within building strong relationships there?
100%, 100%. And I'd like to think that the majority of other clubs accept me, fans accept me, because I'm honest and I've built trust with their clubs. Other great pals of mine have been Tony Brown at West Brom, all the West Brom lads, John Gregory and the Villa players. I get on magnificent because they trust me. And trust is a key thing. This is football. It's not World War III. You don't have, because you love your club doesn't mean you have to hate another club. Because you love your country doesn't mean you have to hate another country. That's how my thinking has always been. If you're all right with me, I'm all right with you. I don't care who you support. That's basically my motto. But networking, it was never a thing in days, networking. You did it because it was an automatic thing by just being nice to people and getting on with people. If that's networking, then I was very good at it.
How do you keep that emotional aspect away then, Tom? So obviously, from your perspective, growing up as a Birmingham fan, and then having to build relationships up with John Gregory and West Brom and other football clubs, obviously when you're working and there might be some emotional outbursts within commentary, etc., how do you keep that balance between making sure that you stay, unbiased to certain teams or kind of professional in the way that you deliver your message?
Yeah. Well, I had emotional outbursts. I had emotional outbursts doing Villa games. I had emotional outbursts in commentary doing Wolves and Albion games, because that was what my job was. You can't fake an emotional outburst when you've seen a great goal. It comes. It just comes. It's there. Whoever you're watching, it comes because that's the way it is. So that was never an issue. Obviously, when I'm doing, and people have managed to, whenever I did Birmingham versus Villa games or Birmingham versus West Brom, I always ensured I had a pundit from Villa and a pundit from Birmingham, so I could never be accused of anything. We were the first to ever do that, because the very reason you said, the accusations could be there about, well, you're always biased. No, I had one from each, and that's how I always did it. And that was the way I did it. But, I'm honest. And if Villa were better than Birmingham on the day, I say they were better. If Albion were better than Birmingham, I say they were better. End of story. If they've done a great move, I say it's a great move, a great goal. I have to be honest to myself before I'm honest to anybody. If I'm not honest with me, how can I be honest to anybody? That's how I've treated life.
Well, it is an emotional game as well, Tom, so that brings out good commentary and good ways of sending messages out as well.
Jasper Carrott wrote the foreword to my autobiography, and he said, there are better broadcasters than Tom, but nobody works harder. And that's been my motto. I'm going to work hard at my craft and do, and in the end, what I gave them was, and this is what I said to all the people who work for me, listen, what you're selling is passion. You're selling passion. They can't see the game. So don't talk about, to the left or the far. Paint the picture so that they live the game in their mind and they come along with you exciting. And so I did those sort of things that we'd never heard of before. I'd count down a game. If a team, Villa were winning 1-0 or West Brom or Birmingham 1-0 with 10 minutes to go, I'd count down the minutes, 9 minutes. Can they hold on 8 minutes? I'd get the listener dragged along with me on an emotional roller coaster ride, because that's what it is. And football is the one thing in this world where you suffer every known emotion to man. From the 90 minutes, you will suffer everything. You'll laugh, you'll cry, despair, anxiety. You'd have every known emotion to man during 90 minutes. So I'm going to enjoy that, and I'm going to let the listener join me on that little ride for 90 minutes. And hopefully, and if it doesn't work out and they get beat, we'll share the sorrow. If they win, we'll share the joy. That's what radio is about. Sadly, I think today, some commentators think it's more about them than it is about the listener. And that's the sadness of it all. You've got to drag the listener with you. Don't treat him like an idiot. Don't talk down to him. Drag him along with you, because it's easier with local radio, if I'm truthful, but it's us against the rest. So if Villa were playing Manchester United, we're going to be biased. Not biased by telling lies, but biased towards our own club because we want them to do well. And that's the way we did it, When Birmingham played West Ham in the semi-final of the Carling Cup, I mean, that's it. Bubbles are bursting all over the East End. I didn't care. The Arsenal, in the final, when Villa beat Manchester United 3-1, I kept carrying, because it's us against the rest. And that's the way I do it. Passion, enthusiasm. If I'm not passionate and enthusiastic, how can I expect my listener to be? How can I expect them to be if I'm not? So I'm leading from the front, and I tell all my reporters and also my commentators, that's the way you've got to be. You've got to drag the listener with us, and you've got to tell him where the game is, because he's blind. The listener's blind. Too many commentators, talk about things as if the listener can see them. No, they can't. They're blind. Put your hands over your eyes and you'll realise then how you've got to commentate on a game. You've got to do it. Tell them the time, the score, because commentators, again, think everybody listens to their every word. No, they don't. Saturdays, they'll go to the shopping with their missus. They'll come out. They want to know what the score is. So don't be afraid to keep telling the score. All those little things. And it means understanding where you are in the listener's life. Sometimes, as I say, certain commentators think it's all about them.
No passion, no point.
100%, absolutely. And I remember once, and I'll tell you, my mentor, Richard Park, he was famous in Scotland for his commentaries, Rangers and Celtic and all the others. And he was the leader, he was the head of Capital Radio, who bought BR&B. And I got on famously with him because he was the same. And one day, only once, Blackburn against, might have been Villa, I can't remember, or Birmingham. And I'm going, wow, this is the most boring game I've ever done. My producer came down to me and said, Richard Park's been on. He said, are you trying to tell everybody to turn off? And that was early in the early days. That struck a chord with me. So you don't, even if the team's not doing well, look for the positives. You can't keep people and say it's great when it isn't. But what you can do, if they're losing, can they get back into the game? You can sell the passion. Can Villa get back into this game? Can Albion get back into this game? They're 2-0 down. Can they get a goal from nowhere? So you can throw a very positive and engage the listener and get him on your side and drag him with you, even when the game isn't the way it should be.
Mm. That's... You mentioned earlier around how some commentators try and make it a little bit more individualised about themselves, and the way that there's a range of different media outlets now where there's so many different opinions and so many different perceptions. How do you think the industry's changed then since you've started, Tom? And has it changed for the better, or do you see loopholes within that process?
I'm not going to say anybody's wrong, because they do it their own way. All I know is I have a saying, and I used to say to all my reporters, listen, if they want stats, the listener, they'll buy a book. So the fact that it's the first time he's worn Red Sox in 8 games and he scored 4 goals wearing them, who cares? Sell the passion. Sell the passion. That's what drags people along. Not that listen, if it's his first goal of the season, I get that. Or if it's his first goal in 12 games, I get that. But I'm talking about the endless array of stats that they throw at us these days. Drives me nuts. But as I said, it's not for me to criticise anybody else, other than to say it might not have been acceptable that they've been working for me. That's all I'll say. I think that things do change, and listen, I'm not the font of all. I'm just telling you how I did it, and was it right or was it wrong? That isn't my decision. That's the listener's decision. But what I will say is, we had the best figures BR&B ever had, even under the great and legendary Tony Butler, George Gabbin. We had the best figures. We outshone TalkSport, Radio 5, Heart, all the other radio stations. We were the market leaders in this area on a Saturday afternoon between 2 and 6. So the listeners have told you what they think.
Just on reflection of your journey, Tom, you mentioned BR&B and other stations that you've been involved with. Is there any standout moments that kind of stick strong within your head that is a bit of a positive memory when you look back on your time? Is there anything that kind of stands out as a proud time?
I think for me, working to get the job at BR&B was just fantastic. There I am working in Birmingham for Tony Butler, George Gabbin, people that I admired. I didn't always get on with George, but I admired him as an operator. Fantastic. But for me, the proudest moment was in 1992-3 when George Gabbin left and Richard Parks called me and said, "I want to see you." And he said, "Look, we're going to make you head of sport BR&B." And I thought, here's me making decisions in my own area, my own town. I'm working and I'm head of sport in my own town. I went on to be head of sport for the group. But at that moment, that was the most precious moment in my memory, is when Richard Parks says, you're going to get the gig. And I was just blown away. And those 36 years following that off, have been just up until 2016 when they decided that they didn't want to do commentaries. That was just the most amazing time. I can't tell you. There's so many standout moments that made me proud. Getting the best radar figures, which is the audience survey figures, doing the breakfast show. Away from football, a guy went on holiday for 2 weeks, and Richard Park said, "Look, can you do the breakfast show as well as run the sports department?" Like a mug, I went, "Yeah, no problem." I was there 10 years doing it. So I was going to Newcastle Tuesday evening for a game, getting back at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was in at 6 the next day. So, these sort of things. But it was fantastic. I just loved radio. It's the greatest medium in the world, bar none. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. There's so many highlights in terms of games and clubs. I can't really, I suppose, winning, when your peers vote for you, we have a thing in radio called the Sony Award. It's the, I think it's the, whatever they call it, Ariva now, or whatever it is, or Aria, or whatever it is. But then it was the Sony Awards, which was the radio Oscars. And I was fortunate enough to win a number of them against the Nationals. Winning the New York Radio Gold for commentary of a Villa game with myself and Ian Crocker. That blew me away as well, to get a worldwide award. Those were important things. Not the award itself, but the fact that people had recognised what you're doing. And with the Sonys, it wasn't the award, it was what the judges said. And on my wall, and not the awards, you can see those two if I point to them. Those two there, they're not the Sony Awards. They're what the judges said, because they summed up what I was trying to achieve. They said exactly what I'd set out to achieve. So I knew I'd got something right. And that was more important than the actual award itself. The awards, I don't know where they are, but those are the judges' comments. And that was important to me. But it's open, being in radio, in sport, has opened up so many avenues for me. Who'd have thought, that a kid from to the back of 437 New John Street West would end up being on radio, would end up being on TV, would end up being on stage, would end up being in a group, would end up having records. You know what I'm saying? And that all came from taking a risk, because when I went to BR&B, I took a 66% drop in salary to join their sports team. But I knew, faith in my own ability, that I'd get there in the end. I'd get it back.
It's a great persistence to have then, if you are taking a jump and a leap from a economic point of view, stability, and then trying to find your passion and trying to pursue a career within what you're passionate about. What's your mindset shift going into that kind of process, Tom, to have longevity and have consistency of putting all your eggs in one basket and going, well, I will make success out of this and I will achieve. But what kind of things do you process during that period? Because I could imagine as well, there's people around you that are saying, don't do it, it's not worth it. How many people become commentators,
My wife at the time thought I was crackers. But, I had total belief in myself because I knew I'm simple about things. Hard work is the platform for success. Ability without hard work is a waste of time. I quote an old ice hockey coach, Don Cherry, of the Boston Bruins. He took them to win the Stanley Cup against all the odds, all the big teams, the New York Rangers and all these teams, and he took them to win it. And in his book he wrote, never underestimate the power of desire over ability. You want both, but to have ability without desire is a waste of time. So you need both. So I always said hard work is the platform. Hard work will get you where you want to be. And also I managed to find a job that I loved. And Confucius said, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So all of a sudden, it's not a 9 to 5. I work 24/7. It cost me, it contributed towards, me getting divorced and stuff because I was always working. I was always out every weekend. There was no social life for my family. I was working every single weekend, some nights, every morning up at 6 in to do the breakfast show. That cost me. But, I'm old-fashioned, and in this modern world, it's almost seen as a failure. But I was a provider for my family. I wanted to provide, and I believed if I worked the hardest, I'd be the last they got rid of. That's how I was. I don't know what Freud would make of it, but that was my mindset. If I work harder than anybody else, they'll be the last one they get rid of. And it's certainly good for 36 years.
Just want to bring you back to the relationship part that we mentioned earlier. And you mentioned Trevor Francis, John Gregory, and I'm sure there's other managers, Steve Bruce, Alex McLeish, other managers that have kind of come into fruition. So if you're building relationships up with them, Tom, and they're going through a period of bad spells, or they're near the sack, or they're kind of going through a period where the fans are phoning in and quite on top of them in terms of their ability to be a coach or to perform and get results, what do you do to interview those managers to try and get answers out? Because obviously you're a friend to them and you've built a good relationship, but also those questions need to be asked around, what is happening behind the scenes, etc. How do you approach that, if that makes sense?
Great question. Let me explain. It's not my job to say any manager should be sacked. Not my job. What I can do is say, that performance wasn't good enough for your team. Where are you going with it? I can do that, and that's what I do. That isn't good enough. That isn't good enough. It's not my job to say sack a manager. It's not. It's not my job to and I used to have this with supporters all the time on the phone in 36 years, by the way, and every Friday night, and I'd be going, they'd say, he's got to go. Not my job to say he's got to go. If he keeps losing, he will go. That's fact. That's what happens in this business. But it ain't my job to say he should be sacked. And I think managers trusted me because of that. I can only remember once, funny enough, I was talking only recently with Brian Little about it. He was West Brom manager, and he came up to do a post-match interview live, and he said something like, well, the board have been useless to me. They've not helped me. This is what we'll... And I remember saying to him, Brian, I think you've just got yourself the sack. He was sacked the following day. And I knew he'd done it, but I think he knew what he was doing. In every other situation, I have conversations with managers away from the air, right, on air. And I'll talk to them and I'll say, look, you must be a bit worried, they'll be coming for you soon, and I have that conversation. So I understand also that it's not as simple as supporters sometimes make out. And supporters will go, he's picked the wrong formation, he's picked this, he's done that wrong, he's picked the wrong team. It's the one thing I found after doing the phoning for 36 years is, if you lose, the manager's useless, the board are useless, the players are useless, the formation was wrong, the team selection was wrong, we didn't sell enough programs. I've got all that. If they win, nobody moans about it. So the game is about winning. It's never been about anything else. But the fine margins between winning and losing, especially in these competitive days of the Championship and the Premier League, are so slim. You know, you can lose a game that people expect you. But the advent of social media has made life hell for people in the game. I mean, it's the curse of the devil, social media. I have to use it, and I use it all the time. The reality is it's the curse of the devil. Everybody's a great manager. Everybody's a great player. Everybody picks a better team. At 5-5, by the way, not at 10-3, but at 5-5, they pick the best team. That's what we all do. It's what makes the sport great. You know, and all of a sudden now, and I've said to chairman, and I'll tell you the truth, I've said to owners and chairman, I hope you don't make a decision based on social media responses, because with 50 million social media users, only the minority are the loud and vociferous and angry and aggressive ones. Most people just read it. So, you know, I do say to them, I hope you don't make important decisions based on social media, because that's the world we're in at the moment.
How do you, just on reflection again of your career, big events, for example, Birmingham City Carling Cup final, Aston Villa in FA Cup, Carling Cup finals, what's the preparation like going into those big games? And obviously being a Birmingham fan, seeing the highs and lows of obviously winning that cup, and obviously the lows from the situation with the ownership. Tell me about that process.
If I'm doing Walsall against Grimsby in the League Cup first round, I'm no different to doing Birmingham in the Carling Cup final. In terms of preparation, I do exactly the same. Exactly. You know, at the end of the day, whether you go to Walsall Grimsby or you go to Birmingham Arsenal Carling Cup or Villa Manchester United final, whatever, those are unique. I don't think people realise there is never, since Derby tram drivers played the first ever game in 1800 and frozen to death, from that day to this, there's never been two games the same. There's never been two free kicks the same. There's never been two throw-ins the same. Nothing has been the same. So every time I go to a football match, whether it's Walsall against Grimsby or it's Birmingham against Arsenal in the Carling Cup, they are unique experiences. So I'm going to go there not knowing. I hate commentators who go, oh, same as last week. No, it isn't. No, it isn't the same game. It's a unique experience. And I treat everything like that I'm privileged to be at a unique sporting event. It's a football game, so I love every game I go to. The Carling Cup, the Cup finals, they have that extra because it's Wembley, because all the ballyhoo and everything. But you can be brought down to earth. I remember Villa played Chelsea in the Cup final. And I was walking across the car park. Now, remember the day before, Birmingham, I think, had lost 4-0 to Oxford, right? So I'm walking across the car park at Wembley. And the phone goes, hello, John Gregory. And I can hear all the Villa players in the background giving, cheering, right? So I must be on the speaker. And he's gone, the lads have asked me, can you play them a record on BR&B to wish them all the best? I said, yeah, of course, no problem. And they're all cheering. I said, what would they like to hear? He said, anything by UB4-0. Now that was it. That cracked me up. He's such a good pal of mine. But that's a banter. That's a banter. And I loved it. We had so much fun with people like that, the banter between us. Gareth Southgate, who was with Villa at that time, laughing his head off at it. These are the things. It's not World War III. It's fun. It's fun. And I have, I have the banter and laugh with them, with Ron Atkinson or John Gregg when I see them about Villa and Blues. We have good, honest banter. And that's the way the game should be. So, in terms of your question, no different. I prepare the same for every single game. Obviously, Wembley has a higher profile because of all the attention on it. But for me, you ask me what I do, there is no difference in my preparation for that game. None at all. I get as excited for that goal as I would any other goal. That's the way I do it. Because it's football.
You mentioned banter and your relationship with Brian Little and John Gregory, etc. Obviously, in the modern game, football has changed and modified, and commercialisation and everything that's associated with the modern game is different, even from a fan's perspective, players' perspective, etc. But what are your thoughts on the current state of the game, and does that impact you in terms of your outlook towards it, in terms of building relationships and kind of commentating effectively? Is there anything that you think's missed from that period, or do you think that is positive? I'm just intrigued on what your overall thoughts are.
Right. Firstly, the game hasn't changed. The game is still the same. Put it in one end, keep it out the other. That's never changed. Everything around it has changed. It's become all about money. It's become all about, sponsors and all that sort of stuff. That does get to me. And there is a new speak now, isn't there? Nothing's changed, but there's a new language. Low block, high block, transition, press. Ain't no different to what was happening before, but they've got new language that's come from, the Barcelona years, I believe, and the coaching. There's nothing different. The game's still the same. And I promise you, I had this conversation with a manager who tried to convince me. He said, the game's moved on since you got involved in BR&B. I went, no, it ain't. I said, put it in one end, keep it out the other. Have I left anything out? Have I? No. The middle bit, Pep Guardiola will do it different from Neil Warnock, but the objective, put it in that end, keep it out. That's the same. So don't let anybody fool you with all the speak, because it ain't any different. Players are probably fitter because of the nutrition and the way they live their lives. I get that. Does it make for better? I've seen a lot of boring, miserable Premier League games. Currently, I've seen some boring, miserable Championship games. But in the past, I saw the same. It really is. I think in days gone by, and I don't mean a million years ago, but I mean recent times, there was a lot more goal-mouth action. There's a lot more hitting the bar and fans got excited and tackling. Now, it's a bit more, it's a bit more passing between each other. Centre-halves and goalkeepers have the best passing stats in the game. There's something wrong. So, but, they tell me it's called progress. I'm not so sure. But one thing's for certain, the technical ability of players is tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. I love watching, people like Jude Bellingham, Jack Grealish, Messi. Oh, I love Mbappe. I love watching these with touch to die for. I mean, they're fabulous. However, people often talk to me about could Pele and Cruyff and Maradona, people best play today. Bet your bottom dollar they would be world stars. What? Wonderful pitches, referees protecting them, nobody allowed to tackle them. They would be unbelievable. Ask yourself the question. If Messi and Ilk were back in those days when they got smashed every time from back, front and sideways and on muddy pitches, would they be the same? Would they be able to cope? I'm not so sure. But I do know that Best & Co would be sensational today because of all that went with it. So I suppose really, you can't look backwards, you can't look forwards, you can't change what happened. But it is a thing I'm asked all the time. They couldn't play today. Yes, they could. But I'm not so sure today's players could play then with all that went on then. Interesting conversation and debate to have, I'm sure, with people. But do I like the games? There's some games I watched today that blow me away. I love watching, for example, Man City had a player who was still one of my all-time favourites, David Silva. I just love watching it. I just loved watching his poise. He was poetry when he got hold of the ball. So I love watching him. Do I like watching centre-halves passing it all round? And no, I don't. Man City do it, though, but they do it with a purpose because they'll do it and then suddenly catch you. They become explosive in the final third and you're in trouble. Some teams do it because it's fashionable. I think there's a difference, in my opinion. In my opinion, there's a difference,
Just on that then, Tom, in terms of obviously your overall career, you mentioned BR&B and the other different platforms where you've co-hosted, hosted, presented, etc. Has there ever been a moment where you've thought, well, actually, this is actually really challenging. I might step away from this. I don't find it as passionate as I used to. Some things have changed, and it actually doesn't represent my values as a commentator and a broadcaster, or those other things that I've mentioned. Has there ever been a time that's challenged you at all within your career?
Not really. Not really. I mean, for example, if I was asked to commentate on a rugby match, I wouldn't do it because I can't. If I was asked to commentate on cricket, I wouldn't do it because I can't. I'm a football man. boxing, football, which I do. I still do boxing commentary. So boxing, football, and the like. Yes, I did kickboxing for Sky TV for 2 years, 8 to 12 shows a year. So I mean, I'll do those things that I'm comfortable with. I'm not gonna do things I can't do just because there's money at the end of it, because I'm not good enough to do it. So I do what I think I can do well, and I hope I can do it well. There are miles better commentators than me, but I defy anybody to be as passionate. That's how I looked at life. That's I was always looked at it. So I did in 2016, when Free Radio decided they didn't want to do football commentary, because this is the weirdness, right? What they can do, they at one stage, they wanted to take away the commentary, where I could still stay there and do a Butler type music program with, that sort of stuff and results going out. But that would get them a lesser audience, or if they played music all day, they would have a lesser audience but make more money. That was even radio in those days, because you have to pay for commentary rights, you have to pay the clubs, you have to pay independent radio, you have to pay commentators, reporters. So you had a bigger audience, but you made less money. And that was always the yardstick, not an audience. I always thought when I joined radio, get me the biggest audience you can. No, that was never the... It was how much money they make, and they worked out they make more money with a lesser audience by not doing football and playing tunes than they would. So those sort of things, I found that challenging, because I'd grown up where you were judged by the audience you brought in. And then all of a sudden I was being judged by how much money was made. Not me, but the company. But I mean, listen, I have no complaints. They were brilliant with me. Even the latter, BR&B changed its name to Free Radio, same company, but changed its name to Free Radio. But it was great for me. So I've got no complaints. I've had a wonderful career. And so many people were good to me. So many people gave me an opportunity. And I grabbed the opportunity. And that's, something I'll always be grateful to a lot of people for having faith in me. People like Butler, who was magnificent for me. And interestingly, Tony gave me my chance. Later on, when I was established as head of sport in the group, and the BBC got rid of Tony Butler, I gave him a job to come and work with me on the phone-in, as a sort of say, hey, I'm now looking after you, you looked after me, I'm giving you... So we did the phone-in together as well, late on in his career, which, I'm really proud that I got the opportunity to say thank you to him in that way, by showing him that there was still a place for him, because we are in a throwaway society where, they throw you away. The BBC are doing it now with a lot of local stations. Throw away people, and it's wrong, So that was for me an important part of my life, is people that have been good to me, like Butler, like Richard Park was magnificent, and managing directors I've had like Ian Rufus and David Bagley at BR&B. Mike Owen always showed great faith in me at BR&B, the programme controller at the time. The news editor Brian Shepherd was fantastic for me. Even though I remember I'd come back from a sports story, and I'd type it all up, take it upstairs to the newsroom, and I'd give it him, and he'd look at it and he'd go, Ross, is English your native language? This is how we made. And I knew then I'd got it. But I learned quickly, because that was a radio, you had to learn quickly. But I wouldn't swap 1 minute. As I said, I found a job I love. And so I've never really worked a day in my life, and I'm still working. Had I been in a factory, I wouldn't still be working, but I'm still doing what I love.
So final few questions, Tom,
Yeah, sure.
and it very much relates to what you just said, really. And to some extent, you've summarised this answer, but I just want to kind of ask you again. So there might be a lot of people that are listening and watching this podcast that have been inspired by your longevity in your career, and to be consistent at the top for such a long period of time within West Midlands and the radio, presenting sports programs to a range of with a range of football clubs. What do you think is the key ingredient to have that longevity and consistency? What advice would you give to people that want to maybe have a continuous progress within what they're passionate about? Is there anything that you think is worth sharing?
Without a doubt. Before I get to that, though, the radio world has changed. There's very little local radio doing sport now, so it's harder to get a job. to start with, right, in local radio. The advent of online and all this sort of stuff. But what I would say to anybody is, A, you will get knockbacks. I did. At first I got a no from BR&B, and then, then the guy left and Butler rang me, and, that was the difference. Keep going, keep asking, and always be prepared. This will sound alien, really, but always be prepared to do anything to get yourself in the door. I had a young producer. He came to me, a snotty-nosed 14-year-old kid, David Salt, and he did do anything. Make me tea, do anything. I got him in, and he'd been in the back room, right? He's now content director for the Bower Radio Group, right? I'm so proud of him. They call it the Ross Academy. Ian Crocker, Ian Danta, all came through the Ross Academy. I'm the only one who didn't get on. There's something wrong there. But they've all gone on to have careers. They've all gone on to have careers because none of them gave up when it was tough. They had they gave up. They prepared to do anything to get into radio, and they did. Salty now, David Salt, as I say, is content director at Bower. Wonderful job, big, powerful job in the industry. And it all done because he was prepared to come in and make a cup of tea when he had to. You know what I'm saying? So for me, persistence, hard work, the platform. You need ability, but hard work being the platform. The desire, to show that desire and passion. We'd have a group of students come to BR&B and we'd talk to them. And I'd go, so what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You've got to have a plan. You've got to have an aim. And I think we'd have others come in who'd say, I want to be in TV. Radio was a stepping stone to TV. You've got to love radio with a passion. I never wanted to do anything else. Radio opened doors in TV and all sorts of things for me. But nevertheless, radio is all I wanted to do. And I was passionate about it. So, firstly, persistence, hard work, passion, enthusiasm, desire, all those things. Now, you notice I haven't mentioned a degree or a certificate or anything yet. I'm telling you, those are the key things. If you come to me for a job and you've got a master's in whatever, and you don't show me persistence, hard work, passion, enthusiasm and all of it, I ain't giving you a job. I don't care what degree you've got. So what I'm saying is, show those things. Those are the things that shine through. And if you're passionate on the radio, it comes down the speakers. The listener grabs it and joins in with you. So that, for me, is fundamental. That passion, that enthusiasm, desire, knowledge. You've got to learn your trade. You can't just ignore it. You can't just think, I can just be a radio presenter. You've got to know what you're talking about. Those sort of things. But all those go together. And add intelligence to that mix, you've got the top.
How would you like to be remembered, Tom? When you finish doing what you're doing and put your feet up and retire, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I think I wrote in my book that on my tombstone, they'll write, the game's gone and now I have. Because that was a phrase that I coined in 1992 when Sky TV came on the scene first. I said, the game's gone. And I said at that time, and people remember it now, they keep mentioning it, I said, the game was in mortal danger from Sky TV. Not that the quality of coverage wasn't excellent, because it is and it still is. But I knew kick-off times and everything else would change. The game would change. The game's gone. And that was the title of my book. So I'd like to be remembered as honest, hard-working, grounded, and I still have time. I still go to matches now, Villa, Birmingham, West Brom, and I sit and chat to fans on the way, because I've been lucky. I've been a fan with a microphone, and I think they realise that, and just remembered is, I don't know, do I want to be just hardworking, honest, and not a man of the people, but a fan of the people, one of them. I don't want anybody to think I was a great anything other than I was the leader of the gang.
Tom, I just want to say thank you for our conversation. Being a Birmingham fan, growing up listening to your voice on the radio, it's a true honour. one thought that came into my mind during the conversation is hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard. And I think that was one thing that kind of stuck out in my mind, listening to you and giving your insights on your career within radio and all those other opportunities that have happened. So I just want to say thank you and good luck in the future and continue doing what you're doing.
Whatever you do, whatever a footballer does, whatever a manager does, whatever a lecturer does, whatever, hard work is the platform for success. You cannot be successful without hard work. It's just fundamental. And that came from me dad sitting me down and telling me, you know, those sort of things. Never be afraid to pick your wages up. In other words, work hard and earn them. And, you know, that's been my mantra in my life. Not the greatest broadcaster, but as Jasper Carrot said, nobody works harder. That's good enough for me.
Excellent. We'll finish there. Thank you, Tom.